Hey everyone, my name is Sangs and welcome back to my blog. This is your Unboxed Mind. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. This blog is mostly about my personal reflections about my experiences in life, and I take a lens of Christianity as I talk about what I've been through, give advice, we talk about essays and psychology and just a bunch of different things, and it's all in the lens of my Christianity because I am a Christian. If you are from my blog, welcome back. It's so nice to see you, and this is another edition of Telling It Like It Is. So for today, I want to talk about friendship breakups and why they hurt. So we often talk a lot about breakups and relationships, but what about friendship breakups? I mean, losing a friend can hurt just as much as losing a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or if you don't go by labels, losing your partner, right? Sometimes they hurt even more. I find because friendships, they take so much time to develop. You're intentionally having these conversations with somebody about, your values, your interests, the things that you enjoy, things that you hate. You talk a lot about your past, your traumas, and if you're able to find a really good friend who relates to these things, you're being really vulnerable. And so for me, friendships really hurt, but let's backtrack a little bit and talk about what even is a friendship breakup. Friendship breakup is when a close friendship comes to an end. Whether it's a slow drifting apart, it's because of betrayal, or a conscious decision from both sides to just split apart. Sometimes friendships end. Some friendships are for a season and some are for the long haul. But if you are in a position where you are going through a friendship breakup, you have been through one and you're still trying to deal with that, maybe you suspect that your friendship with your friends might be coming to an end, this video is for you. So unlike romantic relationships and the subsequent breakups that come from those romantic relationships, there's often no clear cause that comes from friendship breakups. I think that's an accumulation of different reasons and causes, and a lot of times there's no real closure. If you're like me, you've maybe been ghosted a couple of times. I think I've only had 2 friendships end where we've had a conversation or maybe something of a conversation, and then that eventually led to the end of the friendship. But a lot of my friendships have ended because I was ghosted. There is no closure there. There is no, hey, what could I have done better? There is no, let's talk about how you've been feeling. It just comes to an end. And if you're not on the same page, it really hurts. So no official breakup conversation can often leave you feeling like, what did I do? And I kind of want to talk about that. If you're someone who's experienced like the distance that comes from friendships, or maybe an increase in toxicity, or perhaps an unanswered text, someone not responding to your, phone calls, maybe just someone is always like, oh, I'm just not available to talk today, or not available to talk tomorrow, not available to meet here, not available to meet there. There's just a gap that begins to grow between you and your friends. And it can be someone who really meant something to you, but that's eventually shifted. So I really want to talk about why friendship breakups matter and why does it even hurt in the first place. I think a lot of times we don't offer as much credit to friendships as they are worth. I think we just kind of say, this is just someone that I hang out with. But if it was someone you hang out with and they were like a throwaway friendship, why does it hurt so much when they end? I think one, first and foremost, is friendships are built on trust. They're built on shared experiences and deep emotional bonds. They're built on a desire for closeness, a desire for intimacy that goes beyond anything sexual or anything that you can get from a romantic relationship. I think that losing that connection can sometimes make you feel like you've lost a part of yourself, or the part of yourself that you were in that friendship. For example, if you've often been a shy, timid, or introverted person and you make friends with someone who, they're confident, they're outgoing, they might bring out those parts of yourself in you, and because of their love, because of their encouragement, you begin to become more confident, more extroverted, more sure of yourself. If that friendship ends and that person who helped you realize those things is gone, do you still maintain that confidence, or does it slowly start to wane? Do you become unsure of yourself again? I think a lot of times friendships are a little bit more intimate than we give them credit for, and so when they do end, there's almost this loss of a person, this loss of personhood, and it's not just because they are gone, it's because a part of yourself is gone as well. No, in many ways, friendships are built on years of history and really deep conversations and unconditional support. At least that's what the friendships that I desire have often looked like, but when a friendship ends, we don't always know how to grieve it. There's no guidebook on how to get over your friendship ending. There is no playlist, there's no social scripts, and there's like, I feel like with romantic breakups, a lot of people kind of just have a formula. Like, I know I have a formula of how I deal with romantic breakups. It happens, I pray about it, talk to God, I'll cry, I'll vent to my friends, and eventually it just kind of dissipates. But I found, having gone through so many friendship breakups, and we're going to talk about that later on in the video, is that I have ups and downs. Some days I'm like, ugh, whatever, screw that person, I'm better off without them. If they're gone, it's because it's for a purpose. Other times I'm like, geez, their loss really hurt me. I'm never gonna hang out with this person again. I thought we were good, and I might go through videos or pictures on my phone and just see them, and I'm like, we were so close. What happened? So I kind of want to talk about friendship breakups, the pain, the lessons, the isolation that almost comes from that, and how we can move forward. I want to share my personal experience with friendship breakups, what the Bible says about friendships, and then how we can heal when friendships end. Why I bring up the Bible is because, for me, a big reason why I've always valued friendships is just because of how the Bible has represented friendships. Friendships matter to me because I value deep, meaningful connections. I value friendships built on trust, on loyalty, on shared experiences. I value people that will hold you accountable, people that you're equally yoked with. I value people who you're just like-minded individuals, right? And the Bible talks a lot about being like-minded. It talks about friends who are like iron and they sharpen iron. That just means if I'm blunt and I meet someone who's sharper than I am, when we're around each other, we're interacting with one another, what they have rubs off on me and what I have rubs off on them, and we are sharpening each other. The Bible talks about those that are similar will often flock together. So I'm thinking of friendships as like-minded people. I want to be people who are similar to me. That doesn't mean that I'm only going to be friends with people who have, I don't know, ginger hair and piercings. It just means if I say, hey, it's so important to me that my friends go to church, and that person doesn't go to church, it doesn't mean I'm not going to be friends with them, but they're going to be my best friend? Probably not, because we're not like-minded. There is some part of their vision of why they don't go to church and why I go to church that does not align, right? A lot of my greatest friendships have really shaped who I am. And I think the way that the Bible talks about friendship, some of those strongest relationships, they weren't just family ties. Most of them were true friendships that have shaped lives and history. I want to talk a little bit about Jesus and his disciples. I'll talk about Naomi and Ruth, and I'll talk about David and Jonathan. I think the first and foremost thing that I really want to mention when it comes to friendship, at least biblical friendship, is that friends stick closer than a brother, right? A true friend is someone that you choose. A lot of times we just have family members that we grow up with them. We were born into certain families. We don't choose that. But when it comes to friends, you are choosing someone to be in your life. You are choosing your family. And so when you have a choice, I think it's so much more important that there are people who have strong and solid foundations, that they have good values that you align with, that there are people who can hold you accountable, that there are people who will give you wise counsel, that there are people who are gonna call you a fool if you're being a fool, not out of malice, but with the intention to correct, because correction is love and love is correction. I think that the kind of friendships I've seen in the Bible, they are so loyal, they are steadfast, they are selfless, and they are unconditional. I've seen friendships that are so persistent in the Bible. And I think I've just always had a desire to have that type of friendships within myself. Back home in Malawi, I have really great friends, you know, people that I went to church with growing up, people that I went to school with growing up, people that I met when I was in university. They're still my friends today because we've always had an understanding that this is supposed to be deep. My best friend, Wendy, I've known her since primary school, and I feel like I've never been out of step with her because we're always on the same page about things. My other best friend, Carol, even though I met her like later on in my life, the kind of conversation that we had that led us to becoming friends is kind of helped me picture, you know, this is who she is. This is who I am. Am I choosing her in my life? Yes. Is she choosing me in her life? Yes. So do we work intentionally to, I mean, well, this one time I had an argument and we just talked about it. And it was resolved and we continued and we're really, really close. And so I think I look at those kind of friendships back home and I almost like idolize them to the point where I have tried and failed countless times to replicate that model here since I moved to this country. So Jesus and his disciples, you know, Jesus, he's someone that I really look up to as a person, as a leader, as a friend, because of how he was a friend to his disciples. And as much as his disciples were his followers, they weren't just that. They were his friends. In John 15:15, Jesus calls us his friends. He says that he can confide in us because we're his friends. He does not confide in slaves. You know, we are free and we are his friends. And if Jesus can confide in us, then you can confide in your friend. You know, you want to have a friend who you can confide in. And confide in someone isn't just like, hey, I did this and that. It's everything, you know? If you've been through really traumatic experiences, you confide in your friend. If you have been hurt by someone, you confide in your friend. If you're happy, if you have a boyfriend, if you have a girlfriend, if you just got a new job, if you just got fired, whatever it is, you confide in your friend. You know, I think one thing that I really struggled with one of my previous friendships was it felt like I almost had to beg this person to confide in me. Meanwhile, I was always open with her, right? I think it's really easy for me to be open with people because I'm first open with God. I talk to God about everything. And so once I've talked to God, I'm like, okay, now I can go talk to my friends. And I think I just have this background. Yeah, I just have a background of really, if you're my friend, I should have the confidence to tell you things. And if I can't tell you things, maybe you're not my friend, you know? I think one thing that I've really been realizing is that we may perhaps like treat the title of friendship a little bit too loosely. There's some people who are just acquaintances that we call our friends, and then we're surprised when they don't act in accordance with that title. There's some people that we call close friends who are just your friends. There's some people that we call best friends who are just a close friend. So I think I really personally have struggled with giving people a little bit more power than they should have in my life by adding a title to them that maybe they haven't really, I don't want to say earned, because I don't believe in people earning things. The same way I don't earn God's love. I didn't earn his friendship. He just freely gave it to me. And so I think when I give people these things, it's always from a point of, hey, I have faith and I've seen how you are with me. And because of how you are with me, I want to bestow to you this title of being my best friend, of being my close friend, of being my friend. But I think sometimes I've been a little bit too hasty to do that. And just because of how meaningful these roles are in my life, when they haven't panned out how they should, it's really left me in a vulnerable space. So let's talk back to Jesus, right? Jesus called his disciples his friends, not just followers. He walked with them, he taught them, and even forgave them when they failed him. You know, Jesus reminds me that friendships are not perfect. There is never going to be a perfect friendship. I mean, look at Peter. Peter was one of Jesus' closest confidants, and he denied him 3 times, and Jesus forgave him. And all those 3 denials were completely erased. That's friendships. Friendship, you don't keep any record of wrongdoing. If something's happened and you've fallen out, you talk about it, you offer grace, and you forgive. You know, Jesus showed me that friendships go through different challenges, you know, but there is love and there's grace, and that's what holds us together. I think I've always been very intentional with my friendships. I really value giving people second chances, and perhaps that's something that's come and bit me in the bum, because there's been times when I've given someone a chance when perhaps I shouldn't have. But I believe in love and grace because Jesus set that example. Jesus had 12 disciples, and within his disciples, he had his three closest confidants, Peter, James, and John. So Jesus had his friends, but not all of them were his best friends. So I think one thing that I've really learned from the story of Jesus and his disciples is that there's different friends for different things. Anyways, this is becoming a little bit too long, but I want to talk a little bit about David and Jonathan as well. David and Jonathan's friendship stands out to me because Jonathan put David's well-being before his own future as a king. As Saul's son, it was Jonathan's right to the throne. He was the heir of the throne. He should have become king, but Jonathan knew as much as David knew that he was going to be the next king. David didn't try to force it, didn't try to rush it, but Jonathan knew, right? He knew so much that he gave up his own princely, I think it was a robe, but it wasn't a robe, it was probably like armor, but something like that. It's in Samuel. He gave that up to David because he knew he was going to be king. Jonathan even did so much as to stand against his father, to not support his father's kingship because he knew that David was going to be king. Jonathan taught me about loyalty. He taught me that when you have a friend, you stand beside them. He taught me that sometimes friendship is putting your own well-being aside so that your friend can prosper, so that your friend can do well, so that your friend can have a better future. For example, I personally don't go to drag shows, but on this friend's birthday, they wanted to go to a drag show. And so despite my own personal, aversions to drag shows, not because I hate the people doing drag shows, that's just not something that I've ever really been interested in, but I still went because it was for her birthday, and that was, I wouldn't say my well-being, but I did put her above myself. And I've done other things like that for friends. I'm not saying that my friends haven't done that for me, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just kind of giving you maybe applicable ways to understand the scripture. Then Naomi and Ruth, this was loyalty. Ruth had every reason to walk away, but instead she told Naomi, wherever you go, I go. This is in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. And that's the kind of loyalty and love we all should hope to have in a friend. When life gets hard, your friends stay. I haven't really experienced that. And it's funny because seeing these examples in the Bible has made me cherish friendships more than any other relationships in my life. I love my family. I also like romantic relationships, but friendships for me are so important. I think I am most myself in my friends because they choose me to be as I am. They accept me as I am unconditionally, and I do the same for them. Right? And so I'm going to share a personal story of the time that I really lost a friend that I thought was going to be my life forever. I already mentioned previously that a lot of the friends that I've lost in this country just ghosted me. I think it's really hard to make friends as you're aging, especially going into your 20s, into your 30s. Meeting people and having those conversations, it can be kind of challenging. Like, all the people that I know from Malawi, I met while I was pretty young. I didn't have to ask them so many questions. I just experienced life with them. And I feel like now, because of distance, because of work, relationships, financials, whatever it may be, there's so many little roadblocks that get in the way of having these deep, meaningful relationships. But I've never stopped looking for that. And so in 2020, I met a friend through Bumble through Bumble Friends. And we became friends. We mostly got along because we smoked weed together. I don't smoke anymore, and that's something that I even worried about then. I was like, what if I stop smoking? Are we gonna stop being friends? Luckily, we didn't, and eventually we stopped smoking together, and we still remained really good friends, right? And in 2022, I asked this person to become my best friend. They said yes, and I just thought, if I've asked you to be my best friend, you are my best friend also. It's not a one-way street. It's not a one-sided friendship. I am as close to you as you are as close to me. And if you're my best friend, I am putting you above a lot of people. Sorry, that's just how it goes, right? If you're the best friend that I have, you have priority. You have certain rights over other people in my life because of that status that I've put you at. And so I just thought we were on the same page with that. Fast forward to 2024, something happened where I was really unhappy with how she handled something. And so I communicated this to her. I'm a firm believer in communication. And because she was around when I lost those other friends, and the ones who ghosted me, she knew that I was very big on, like, if something's going wrong, just tell me, because I don't know how to fix it if we don't talk about it. And if I don't feel okay, I'm gonna tell you, because honestly, I think it's really important to be able to hold your friends accountable when they're not being good friends. I think it's also really important to be able to share your thoughts and know that they're gonna be heard. And so I just talked to her. I was just letting her know I just didn't feel really valued in the friendship. I didn't really feel like she was meeting my needs as much as I was meeting hers. What I mean by that, it felt like I was putting in 100% of effort and she was putting in like 75. And it's fine, you can't put in equal effort all the time, but for a while I felt like I had done a little bit more in our friendship than she had. And that's not a point of like I was holding on to her wrongdoings. It was more so I just wanted an acknowledgement that she has noticed how much I've done and that she would meet me where I'm at in that friendship. Went back and forth talking about this situation, and at the end of the conversation we kind of decided, you know what, we're going to try to be better friends to each other. She kind of confirmed what I already believed, in that I wasn't her best friend. I might have been calling her my best friend, but in her eyes I wasn't hers, you know. And I'd even asked her, I'm like, if I never brought this up, would you have ever even talked to me? Would you have ever even like shared these thoughts? Like I would have just kept going believing that I'm your best friend if I never brought this up. And she said, yeah, if you didn't bring it up, we never would have talked about this. And this kind of left me feeling really funny, because I'm just like, are we not on the same page? You know, am I valuing you higher than you're valuing me? Am I doing a bit more to make sure that this friendship is just always, not always 100%, you can't have that, but am I doing a little bit more than you are? And if I am, why am I okay with that, you know? Yeah, so I think after talking about that, I realized that our values were very misaligned. And then the next day we talked again, because she said she didn't feel like I really hurt her. So we talked, went back and forth. We both decided that we're not best friends, we're just friends, you know, that we're gonna work hard together to meet up more often, to have intentional conversations about our likes and our dislikes, the things that hurt us, the things that make us upset, etc., etc. And the thing is, she was saying these things because she felt like she didn't know me, which is crazy, because I'd always been very upfront. You know, anyone who knows me knows I'm very open about myself. I discuss things very openly. And so for her to say that she feels like she didn't know me, she doesn't know how I react to things, it just felt like out of left field. It kind of felt like someone covering up for something, because I knew her. You know, we'd meet up and we'd talk about things, and I'm making mental notes about things that she's saying, things that she's experienced, because I want to understand her whys. And so for me, it was just kind of confusing to hear from her that she doesn't know me, yet I know her, you know? So it's like, how can it be that we're at the same level of friendship and yet I know you better than you know me? That was strange to me. And so after agreeing that we were both going to try to work really hard on our friendship, a couple of days later she texted me this really, really long message, just kind of saying like, you know, I just feel like that entire conversation, I wasn't heard. I kind of felt like you made everything about yourself and it just made me uncomfortable, and so I hope you understand, but let's not be friends anymore. And I'm like, excuse me? You know, it caught me really off guard, and I was with someone else that day, and so I kind of just explained to them the situation, and they're like, oh, but maybe you can try to reach out to them. And I'm like, but why? Why would I do that? And this is not even me trying to be petty or anything, but I was just generally confused at that suggestion. Like, why would I be the one to reach out to someone when my initial chat was just, hey, I'm not feeling appreciated? And then it escalated to the point where the friendship ended. I'm like, if I, as your friend, if I can't hold you accountable, if I can't tell you how I'm feeling, and if I can't disagree with you about something without it imploding our friendship, then maybe we're not really where we're at. And I kind of had the inclination that she blocked my number, probably. She removed me off her Instagram, removed me off her Facebook, just removed me off her Snapchat. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I guess we really just are not friends. So I allowed it. But it hurt. I'm not going to lie. It really, really hurt. It hurt my feelings, it hurt my heart. It made me feel like all those things that I had done were just not appreciated. It made me feel like, what did I do that was so wrong? Was me really bringing up this thing that I wasn't happy about the catalyst of our friendship ending? Or were there things that were already happening in the background and me just mentioning that kind of escalated stuff? So it really, really hurt my feelings. I felt like for a good month or two, I just like, what? I was really confused. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And I think I really became hard on myself. I was like, maybe I'm just not a good friend, because the common denominator on my friendships ending has been me. So maybe I'm not as good of a friend as I think I am. But then I think back to my friends in Malawi, and I've never had issues with my friends in Malawi. Never. I will kid you not. That's not been a problem. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. No, they're not perfect either. But I don't know if it's just how, maybe it's a cultural thing, but I've never had issues with those people. I love those people. They love me. And I can tell that there's equal appreciation. But then I went to talk to my therapist, and we just kind of talked about the reason that I even started therapy in the first place was because I felt like I cared about people more than they cared about me. And she just kind of said, Sangwani, this is the same reason that you came to me. This is the same problem that you were having 2 years ago when you first started therapy. So what have you learned? And I sat there and I realized, I have very certain convictions. Maybe it's because of my faith, maybe it's because of where I grew up or who I am or my culture, but I have different convictions and I am not willing to give them up for the sake of appeasing people. I've noticed that in this country, a lot of people are like, they're very interested in casual friendships, or like low maintenance friendships, or just like a, hey, I'll hang out with you type of friendship. But I'm like, no, I want the nitty gritty friendships. I want to know that if I went missing, you're one of the people that's helping look for me. I want to know that if you are having a bad day, I can come to your house and we can talk. I want to know that we can go shopping together. I want to know that, I remember this one time my friend was complaining about not wanting to hang out because she had to wash her hair. And I was like, okay, I'll come to your house and I'll wash your hair. And maybe it sounds crazy, but for me, it's like, that's not a problem. Why wouldn't I do that for you? That way we can still hang out and you get your hair done. So I just think the different views of friendship have just kind of caught up to me. And I keep trying to adjust myself. But I don't think I have to adjust myself. I think it's adjusting my criteria for the kind of friendships I'm looking for. So that leads me into the next portion of this video. Why do friendship breakups happen? There's several reasons. One, you grow apart. Life changes, values change, people change, their situation changes. Maybe your friend got married or had kids and you grow apart, and just where you're at is just no longer aligned. For example, I had a friend who, when I initially met her, she was going through a lot of things in her life and I just felt like she needed a support. So I became a support for her. I had no issues doing that. We would hang out when she needed someone to hang out with, which is okay. I'm not very like social, but when my friends need me, I'm available. But when I noticed that she was getting better, I kind of found myself asking, what's the purpose of this friendship? Am I just someone who is there for you when you need it? Or what's the reason? Why are we friends, basically? And so I talked to her and I just kind of mentioned, like, we don't really like the same things. We're very misaligned. We do things very differently. It didn't feel like we were walking the same path. I'm not saying we have to be like this. I'm just saying, are we next to each other or are we diverting? And she kind of took it to say that I was saying that I'm better than her. And she sent me this long text message, just basically said a lot of nasty things like, you're not better than me just because you do this. How can you say you're a Christian when you're doing da. And then she just kind of signed it, your unaligned friend, and lose my number or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, okay. That is not how I would have handled that. But I just think friendships grow apart. Sometimes you're no longer aligned and that's okay. Sometimes friendship breakups happen because there's been a betrayal or a broken trust, whether it's lying, gossiping, or just loyalty. These things can destroy a friendship. if you have to gossip about your friend behind their back, maybe you need to ask yourself, are they really as close as you think you are? If you find yourself consistently lying to them about what you're doing or why you can't hang out with them, ask yourself, are they really as close as you think you are? And on the other side, if you know that they're doing those things to you, maybe you guys are not as close as you think you are. Sometimes friendship breakups happen because of one-sided effort. I think that's why this last friendship ended for me, when one person gives more than the other does, or gives and the other one doesn't. Some people are just takers, some people are givers. I know that I am a giver, and I'm not saying that all my friends have been takers. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, I think sometimes it's unequal amount that's being given and taken, and it can kind of leave the giver feeling just worn out and drained, right? Sometimes friendship breakups happen due to toxicity and negative influences. Sometimes friendships bring more stress than joy. If you find yourself hanging out with somebody who makes you just like internally roll your eyes, or you're just always stressed or nervous or anxious around them, and you're not joyful, you don't feel like you're being uplifted, you don't feel like you're being heard, you don't feel like, you're really moving in a positive direction, I think you have to kind of question that friendship. And then another reason friendship breakups end is because of different values and different paths. Who you are now isn't always going to be compatible with who they are now. And where they're going might not be compatible with where you're going. I think it's okay to acknowledge that and end friendships amicably rather than nastily. So I'm going to give you some signs of a potential friendship breakup. Some signs to look out for when you're suspecting that your friendship is on the rocks, or you feel like your friendship isn't really doing as well as you wanted to. Look for when conversations feel forced or one-sided. Look for when people stop making an effort to check in on you or to spend time with you. They respond to text messages really late. If you call them, they never call back or have an explanation as to why, they didn't call back. If you are consistently the one making plans, or they cancel a lot, look out for that. If you feel drained or uneasy after being around them, also pay attention to that. A lot of times our body's nervous system will tell us things before even we have an understanding of why those things are happening. So if you're feeling like whoever you are with, they're draining you, they're making you nervous, they're making you feel uneasy, they always lead you into situations that you just don't feel comfortable being in. Like, for example, I remember this one friend of mine, we went to the grocery store together and they stole something from the store. And that left me feeling so uncomfortable, and that should have been one of my first signs, but I continued to be friends with them. And even though that made me really uncomfortable, because I'm like, why? And she explained herself, yeah, whatever. But I just didn't find myself really vibing with that interaction. And yeah, sometimes a sign for a potential breakup is there's growing tension, there's resentment, there's passive aggressiveness. You find yourself just kind of like having a sour taste in your mouth when you think about talking to them. Or when you do talk, let's say you're having a disagreement, it doesn't feel like a natural disagreement. It feels like there's tension, and that tension remains going forward. Another potential sign is that they celebrate your failures more than your wins, or they consistently remind you of your failures and don't often mention the time that you did well, or they hold on to things that have happened, maybe mistakes that have been made, and they don't forgive. They might say that they're forgiven, but they don't forgive, and so they consistently bring things up for you. Another potential sign is that you or they avoid deep conversation and keep things very surface level. If you are someone who requires deep friendships and you find that most of your interactions with your friends are surface level, that's something that you might have to look into, because I personally do not like surface level friendships. I don't know how to do that. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel like we're wasting time, and I don't believe in time wasting. I don't believe that anything should be wasted. So even those surface level relationships, they're not really so much wasted. They're just showing you that that's not the kind of friendship that you're requiring. So how do you recognize when a friendship no longer serves you? I think first and foremost is when your needs and your values are no longer aligned. And I think a lot of times friends don't talk about things that they need from each other because we think that it's too deep. Those are things that you talk about in relationships. But a friendship is a relationship. You're committed to that person. You are loyal to that person. You are invested in that person. You care about their likes. You care about their dislikes. You remember things about them. You experience life with them. They are your companion. So Why don't we talk about needs in our friendships? I feel like it's so big to sit your friends down, especially like newer friendships. Be like, hey, I have this expectation of my friendships. You know, I expect that if we are close and I need this or you need that, then that's something that we're gonna prioritize. I expect that if I set a boundary, it's going to be met. Things like that, right? Those are things that need to be talked about even in friendships. When you feel like you're always walking on eggshells around them, if you have someone that you feel like you're consistently having to please or to, you know, mediate the air or kind of check in on the temperature of their mood right now before you bring up something, before you talk to them, that's a little bit suspicious, you know? If you feel like you've outgrown the relationship, sometimes you just outgrow friendships. For example, if back in the day all we used to do was gossip and now I just don't want to gossip anymore, but you're still the kind of friend who only wants to gossip, I've outgrown that space. So you can either grow with me or I can grow downwards. Well, that's not really growth. Or I can devolve to meet you, but then that just negates all the growth that I've done. In that situation, unfortunately, you might have to consider breaking off that friendship, because if you're outgrowing them, you're going to continue to outgrow them. And if they're not keeping up, like I said, iron must sharpen iron. At that point, they're just not sharpening you, you know? And finally, you can recognize the friendship is no longer serving you when there is more conflict than connection. Yeah, this one was hard for me because I think I don't really notice conflicts in friendships. And when I do notice conflicts, I just think it's something that we can grow through. You know, all friendships have little bumps in the road. We'll get through it. But if after a conflict there is no connection and it's not building, that's maybe a sign that your friendship no longer serves you. So now we're going to kind of just talk about the emotional impact of friendship breakups, right? The pain of losing a close friend, it can be really deep. I'm still feeling the loss of that friend because, like I said, they were my best friend in this country. I thought we were going to be friends for a really long time. I still look back and I find pictures and I'm just like, what went wrong, you know? And I'm like, I get stuck on, should I delete this video? Should I keep it? If I find things that they gave me, I'm like, does it even still have that much meaning to me? You know, that doesn't mean that the friendship itself wasn't meaningful. It just hurts. Like, it's grieving, not just the person, but the version of yourself that you had in that friendship. And I did grieve this friendship. It really, really hurt. I felt a lot of loneliness. I felt a lot of self-doubt, and I felt a lot of guilt, thinking that if I just didn't bring up that conversation, maybe we'd still be friends. Like, I didn't expect that our friendship would end in 2024 when 2025 was just right around the corner, you know? So this year, I'm not going to see them in the summer. I'm not going to visit them. We're not going to do our summer plans that we had last year. We're not going to do our Halloween plans. We're not going to do our Thanksgiving plans. Those are things that I feel guilt over, but it is painful. It's really painful, and I think I'm getting to a place of being able to really acknowledge, you know, the pain of losing a friend and really trying to just process that. So if you've been going through a friendship breakup, you're really valid in how you're feeling. You're so valid. You're not being dramatic. I just want to validate you. You're not being dramatic. This is real. These are real feelings that you're feeling. So our friends aren't only the people who can be in the wrong during friendship breakups, you know. You can also be in the wrong. And if you're the one in the wrong, here's some ways that you can recognize that you are. One, if you dismiss your friends' feelings or their struggles, you dismiss their joy, you dismissed their hurt, you dismissed that one time they wanted to share something with you. If you're just being a dismissive and neglectful friend, you might be in the wrong. Sorry, boo. If you took more than you gave in the friendship, if you're taking advantage of your friend, babes, you're in the wrong. I think we need to be willing to hold ourselves accountable and recognize that we're sometimes the takers. We're not always going to be the givers. If you crossed a boundary that they clearly set, that's number 3. If you crossed a boundary that your friend set and you didn't acknowledge or apologize about it, you might be in the wrong, because your friend is very justified in having a reaction to you crossing their boundary, especially if something that was like explicitly stated. Some things are like implicit, but if it's explicitly stated, hey, this is my boundary, please respect it, and you cross that boundary and you show no remorse for it, yeah, that's not cool, babes. And number four, you let pride or ego stop you from making things right. I think it's very normal to sometimes be the one in the wrong in a friendship. And what's not normal is not making amends. If you're really genuine about that friendship and you want it to continue, you don't want your friend who's clearly justified in wanting to end things with you, if you don't make it right or show any intentions of correcting your wrongs, yeah, man, I'm on your friend's side. No, I'm just joking. I think it's just important to be able to like mention and acknowledge when you're in the wrong, because we're not always right. We're not perfect people. But then what do you do when you're in the wrong? You apologize sincerely and acknowledge your mistakes. Apologize with your whole heart and genuinely ask for forgiveness. And once you've acknowledged your mistakes, you have to follow that up with action. You follow that up with genuine and intentional action. The same way that when we repent to God for sinning, our repentance is so much about turning away from that sin and making better decisions. When you apologize to your friend, turn away from that thing that you've been doing that bothers them and make better decisions. If your friend needs space, give it to them. Don't force a resolution just because you want things to be okay. Just because you said sorry, it doesn't mean that things are just suddenly okay. Sometimes people need time to really forgive, to understand you. Sometimes people need time to even just like come to the conclusion that they're no longer upset at you and that they want to work towards resolution. So don't force resolution. Let it build naturally, but don't also just be like, oh yeah, since I'm giving you space, that's it. Check in on your person and just be like, hey, I know we're taking space right now. Is there anything else that you need clarity on? Can I do anything? Because you don't want to just be content with giving them space, because what if that space becomes distance and distance becomes the end? And you want to be able to learn from the situation so you don't repeat that pattern. Patterns are things that we should all be paying attention in our lives, because patterns are what almost like make up our life stories. The things that we do that we don't pay attention to, they make up our life stories. And so if you've done something and you've been in the wrong in your friendship, learn from that, especially if your friend has forgiven you. But even if they haven't, learned from it and vow to be a better friend so you don't repeat that pattern in someone else's life, because you don't want to be the person who makes someone stop believing in true friendships. And finally, accept that they may not want to reconcile and respect that, even though it sucks. Yeah, that sucks. That really, really sucks. But sometimes people just don't want to be friends anymore. They don't want to reconcile, and that's okay. You did what you had to do. You apologized. You tried to make things right. And if they just can't see past that, be content in the fact that you tried to make things right. And we're just going to talk a little bit about, how to move forward. How do we process and heal from a friendship breakup? I think the first and foremost thing to do is to acknowledge your feelings and to grieve the friendship. Acknowledge that that thing has ended and that you feel hurt by it, and find ways to grieve your friendship. I think how I grieved, I talked to a trusted friend, therapist. I talked to my mom, talked to my sister, talked to my friends back home. I talked to my therapist, and they all gave me different perspectives. But ultimately, I was just like saying, you know what? I had a good friend. I was a good friend. They might not have been perfect moments between us, but I enjoyed it while it lasted. And that grieving was just, being okay with deleting things off my Instagram. I don't have to delete them from my phone, but they're not on my Instagram anymore because I don't really want to be reminded of that. It was just saying, you know what, screw it. It is what it is, isn't it? I mean, don't have that kind of attitude if you know it's not what it is. But for me, it really was just, it is what it is. I trusted that God knew what he was doing. I think for me, my biggest thing, what really helped me grieve and process anything ending is just God. I talked to the Father, and he helped me to understand things. He just kind of made it clear that that friend was not who he wanted in my life in this coming season, and I was okay with that. Resist the urge to dwell on the what ifs. Yeah, babes. It doesn't matter. If you ask yourself what ifs, it won't change what's happened. You can't go back to the past to fix it. You can't rewrite that story. It's happened. It's over. It's ended. Let it go. Not like that. I just mean acknowledge that it's happened. Feel your feelings. And by that, I just mean whatever feelings you're feeling, don't try to block them out or intellectualize them. Say, I feel angry today. Okay, what does anger really mean? Do I feel slighted? Do I feel like there's an injustice? All right, journal it. Write it down. Talk to someone. I am a journaler, so I will journal it. I will talk to myself. I'll talk to God. I'll pray. And that's helped me to put a name to those feelings and to really feel them. And then you let it go. Because if you don't let it go, it's going to become like this. It becomes like a ball in your heart and in your life. And it stops things from flowing easily. So resist the urge to say, what if? What if this? What if that? What if nothing? Let it go, babes. Let go of resentment. Forgive even if you don't get closure. If the friendship breakup happened without your say so, if you didn't really get to decide this, forgive. Let go of any resentment that you have towards that person, because it's like, once again, it's just going to come like this, and it's going to get lodged in there and the flow won't happen anymore. So forgive. I know forgiving is hard, but we don't always forgive for the other person. We forgive to move on. We forgive to set ourselves free. Forgiveness is freedom. Grace is freedom. Be merciful even, like they might deserve your anger, but choose to show mercy instead. Even if you don't get closure, not everything has a nicely bowed up ending. Some things are complex and complicated, but just don't hold on to that resentment, because it's going to hurt you more than it hurts them. They're gone. They're living their best life without you, And finally, pray for peace, pray for wisdom, and pray for the strength to move forward. If you're not someone who prays, I would still advise you to pray. Just talk to God and say, God, this thing is really hurting me. I trust that you know what you're doing. I trust that your will is better than my own, but I need peace. I need a heart to understand. I need wisdom, and I need the strength to move on from this hurt, because it's killing me, or because it's preventing me from being happy, or preventing me from being open to other friendships. Have those kind of prayers, talk to God about it, and just watch how he's going to transform how you feel about some things. And I'm going to just ask you to set healthy boundaries and accept change. Know what you need in a friendship. Know the things that you desire. I know that I desire communication, intention, depth. I desire loyalty. I desire just like I desire people who are going to meet me halfway. I desire people who are like-minded. So these are my needs in a friendship. What are yours? Know those needs and seek out those kind of friendships. Be okay with seasons of change. Some seasons are going to be wrought with friends. You're going to have so many friends that you're going to know what to do with. And some seasons are seasons of isolation, where you just need to be by yourself and not have as many people that you're hanging out with or talking to. Some friends are only there for a season. When I was in South Africa, I had a friend who was only for that time. When I was in South Africa for like a year, that friend was only for South Africa. Once I left, I was never friends with that person anymore, and I was okay with that. Some people are just for a season. Some friends are just for school. Some friends are just for work. Some friends are just for that basketball league that you play for. That's it. But also know the difference between friends and acquaintances. So I think that will save you a lot of hurt. I know that's my new thing. I want to be serious about making those distinctions. If you're just someone that I know, you are an acquaintance, and that's that. That's the boundary. If you're my friend, there's certain expectations that I'm going to be looking for. If you're my close friend, my best friend, my inner circle, there's things that come along that, and those things I want to be able to communicate better going forward. Give yourself permission to walk away if necessary. This is just like how to set boundaries and accept change. Give yourself permission to walk away if necessary. If you need to bounce, baby, do it. I'm kidding. No, but I mean that for real though. If you have clocked very early on that this friendship does not meet your needs, it's not really for the season, give yourself that permission. Just be like, hey, I'm so sorry, but I just don't think this is going to work out between us. We're just not aligned, and walk away. And finally, learn from past friendships to build healthier connections. I have definitely learned from these past friendships. I don't think I'm ready for any new friends. I think more than anything, I just want to appreciate the friends that I have now more than anything. My friends in Malawi, the like 2 friends that I have who live in this country, I just want to appreciate them. You know, I really want to just like love on them, be available for them, let them know that I care about them, and invest in those friendships because they're the ones who've stuck by me, and I'm gonna stick by them. And I've learned from these past experiences, and I really want to help my friends and just be there and just have healthier connections. So just a little encouragement for you going forward. If you are currently going through a friendship breakup, you are not alone. You're not the only one who's going through that, who's been through that, who's ever going to go through that. There's so many helpful resources on YouTube, with therapists, with your friends, with your families. Do not be afraid to open up about how you're feeling, because I know it's a pain that is almost on its own. I can't really compare it to like someone dying or losing your partner or anything like that, really, but it has its own type of pain and it's not fun. Losing a friend doesn't mean that you're unlovable. It doesn't mean that you will never find good friends again. It doesn't even mean that you're a bad friend or that they're a bad friend. Some endings are necessary for growth. In the Bible, in John 15, it talks about how the gardener must purge some branches and how it prunes others. The ones that are pruned are the ones that are going to grow even more. The ones that are purged were probably weighing down this branch or not connected to the right roots, and they gotta go because they're not producing any fruits anyway. Seek friendships that are going to be fruitful, and those can also have ups and downs. Just because your friendship is not going through a breakup doesn't mean that it's not going to go through rocky seasons, but some things are necessary for growth. You know what? God places the right people in our lives at the right time. I truly trust that if it wasn't for God, I would not be able to experience these losses and come out just feeling like, okay, whew, back at it again. You know, if it wasn't for God, I would just be feeling like, oh, I'm so downtrodden, woe is me. But trust that God, in his right timing, in his perfect and beautiful timing, he will bring about the new, healthiest and most like beautiful, fruitful friendship that you need, and it's going to happen exactly in the right way. In the meantime, I want you to focus on yourself. You know, nurture the friendships that you have that are still thriving. Remind those people that you love them. Remind yourself that you are lovable. Remember that your worth is not tied to who stays or who leaves your life. Your worth is tied to what God says about you. And God says that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. God says that you are loved. God says that you are wanted. You know, God says that you are worthy of love. God says that you deserve joy, you deserve peace, you deserve laughter. So just carry that with you as you go forward. So I'm just going to summarize some of our key takeaways. You know, friendship breakups happen. They're not the end of your life. Sometimes they're necessary, they do hurt, and they matter, you know, for our lives. I value friendships so much, specifically because of the things that I've seen, the friendships I've seen in the Bible, that I'm beholden to them. You know, I want those kind of friendships, and I do have those kind of friendships with my friends back home in Malawi. Just because I don't have them here doesn't mean I won't ever have them, and you might have never experienced that kind of friend, but you will. So I just want to invite you guys to share your thoughts and your experiences in the comments on my blog or on this video on YouTube. I hope that this space has been helpful for you. I hope that this discussion is something that you were able to, you know, listen and understand, and that it brought forth some clarity for you. And if not, I'm always willing to talk about it some more. So do let me know if you want me to do like another video on friendships. My blog is toliveunapologetic.wordpress.com. unboxed.com. And I am Sangs. This has been Telling It As It Is, an Unboxed Mind podcast. Thank you for your time. Bye. God bless you.